Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So taking a look at BT04, we have a whole bunch of new and powerful tools to be working with, especially on a budget. So today's deck is going to be a blue Regalecusmon, and Regalecusmon is definitely a very powerful Digimon that is interacting with the sub-theme of attacking the opponent's evolution sources. So that is the whole objective and goal of the deck, is to try to get the opponent's Digimon to have no evolution sources, so that way a lot of your other cards can gain some benefits, and Regalecusmon is a really good card for attacking the opponent's evolution sources. So, going over the deck, starting with the digitama, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Wanyamon. So, Wanyamon is a pretty okay digitama. Blue doesn't really have that great of digitamas on a budget, but Wanyamon is definitely fitting on theme with the deck. But the digitamas, for the most part, could be whatever you feel like. I just feel like Wanyamon being the main digitama is really decent for the deck, just because he has this nice inheritable ability where during your turn, while the opponent has 2 or more Digimon with no Digivolution sources in play, then this Digimon gets plus 2000 DP. So blue isn't necessarily known for having good DP boosting, so Wanyamon being a good card to use for DP boosting our Digimon to make them hit even higher numbers is definitely a really good aspect of the card. And thanks to Regalecusmon and a whole bunch of the other new tools we could be playing around with, it's definitely a lot easier to trigger this ability now than it was before. And then as far as the 5th Digitama, as I mentioned, the Digitama slot for the style of deck doesn't really matter. It could kind of be whatever you feel like or whatever you could get your hands on, but I'm just choosing to run 1 copy of Bukamon just because Bukamon has this nice inheritable ability of when attacking, you get to trash the bottom Digivolution source off of one of your opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon. So the whole goal of the deck is to try to get the opponent's Digimon to have no Digivolution sources, so Bukamon being a Digitama that helps us do that is definitely really powerful. Next, I'm running 4 copies of Elecmon. So Elecmon is just the value-efficient vanilla card of the deck, where you know the drill. He has a low play cost, low evo cost, decent DP, all just making him a very good Digimon to be working with. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gomamon. So this is the BT01 version of Gomamon, and this version of Gomamon is really only in the deck just because he has a decent inheritable ability of on delete, allowing us to gain 1 memory. So there is a chance that whatever we have paired with Gomamon is going to end up being deleted at some point. So it's always a good thing to make sure that we don't feel as bad with losing our Digimon, so Gomamon at least gaining us a memory for when our Digimon is deleted definitely can screw up some of the opponent's plays. Or he could even enhance some of our plays, all depending on how we're utilizing the card. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Gomamon. So this is the starter deck Gomamon, and this Gomamon is really only in the deck just because he is another value-efficient vanilla, just like Elecmon over here. You could go back and forth on the ratios, it doesn't really matter, they're just in the deck just to fill up that slot. I'm just choosing to run 2 Gomamon and 4 Elecmon just because I'm already running a Gomamon in the deck, and Omnimon is still a card that could be played, so we would rather not take that chance and lose even harder to Omnimon, so that's the only reason why I'm running 2 of this Gomamon instead of maxing him out even more. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Gabumon. So this Gabumon is basically doing the exact same thing as Bukamon in terms of what his inheritable ability is, where when attacking you get to trash the bottom Digivolution source off of one of your opponent's Digimon that's level 5 or less. So it's just allowing you to target 1 level higher, which can be pretty good because this is just a overall decent ability at trying to get rid of the opponent's evolution sources, and blue doesn't really have that great of inheritable abilities on a generic level, so we still want to figure out what are the best cards that we have to work with, and this Gabumon, especially for this style of deck, is still really good. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gorillamon. So Gorillamon is a pretty solid Digimon to be using in this deck just because he has a really low evo cost, making him very easy to go up into and act as a good stepping stone to Digivolve past into our higher stages that much more efficiently with. On top of which, him having 6000 DP also could matter in the off chance that we actually want to try aggressing with the card, but more often than not, we're just playing him just because he has a very low evo cost. Next, I'm running 2 copies of Tobiumon. So Tobiumon is really only in the deck similar to why Gorillamon is in the deck, just because he has a really low evo cost of 1, but on top of the fact that he has a really low evo cost of 1, he also has a really low play cost of 3, so if we ever don't see a rookie, we don't feel that bad if we have it to Tobiumon in our hand, just because we could hard play Tobiumon and then try to work our way up from there. So he's just acting as a really good tempo and efficiency card, and we don't really care about the DP because we're not trying to aggress with the card. He is actually more of a stepping stone than Gorillamon, just because we want to digivolve past him as quickly as we possibly can. Next, I'm running 2 copies of Lobomon. So Lobomon is still just an absolutely insane Digimon to be working with, so I just feel like for what the deck is doing and what it could be doing, Lobomon is still just a very good card at trying to close out the game because he has this very powerful ability where you could digivolve him from our hand on top of one of our blue tamers as if that tamer was a level 3 Digimon. So the whole point of the deck is try to aggress onto the opponent's security as much and as often as we possibly can, and then we could just digivolve our tamer into Lobomon to close out the game with, and the only tamer that we're going to be running, which you'll see later on, is a memory fixing tamer, so we'll always be able to utilize this card, and this card is definitely a very powerful aggro tool. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Grizzlymon. So Grizzlymon is the deck's dedicated blocker, so having a blocker is still really important and really good. That's why we are still running Grizzlymon. Next, on to the Ultimates, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Monzaemon. So Monzaemon is a really good card just because he is another tempo and efficiency tool, just because compared to all of the other level 5s that we could be working with, he has a really low play cost. So if we need to hard play him, we're not afraid to do that just because it's, again, lower than everything else we could be playing. And on top of which, he also has a low evo cost, so he is acting as a really good stepping stone no matter how you use the card to try to get into our level 6s as fast as possible with. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of MachGaogamon. So MachGaogamon is one of the best blue cards to come out of BT04, and this card is absolutely insane because it's doing everything that blue was kind of lacking before. So what he's doing is he has the main ability of digi-burst 2, so for trashing the 2 Digivolution sources underneath him, you get to use the following ability, which is to bounce one of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon back to their hand, and then all of the Digivolution sources under that are trash. So this is really good just because blue didn't have a good way of interacting with the opponent's Digimon before, and now that they have a Digimon to actually actively bounce and interact with the opponent's Digimon, that just makes MachGaogamon a very powerful, very standout card, on top of which he also has a really powerful inheritable ability where during your turn, while you have a tamer in play, then this Digimon gets plus 2000 DP. So again, blue wasn't necessarily known for having good DP boosting, so the fact that we have MachGaogamon to not only just bounce and interact with the opponent's Digimon, but to DP boost to our Digimon as well, just make this card even more powerful than a lot of the other ultimates we were playing before. And then the last ultimate of the deck is going to be 3 copies of WereGarurumon. So WereGarurumon from the starter deck is still a really good card just because he's fitting on theme with what the deck is doing, and he is rewarding you for the opponent having a Digimon with no Digivolution sources in it. So what he's doing more specifically is he has the inheritable ability of during your turn, while the opponent has a Digimon with no Digivolution sources in it in play, then this Digimon gains Security Attack +1. So Security Attack +1 is still just really important because that's how you're going to close out the game even faster than you normally would, just because he's allowing you to deal some extra damage for doing basically everything that the deck is going to be doing, and he has really good synergy with the 2 level 6s that we're going to be playing in the deck. Next, on to the level 6s, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Vikemon. So Vikemon is still just a very powerful Digimon to be working with, especially on a budget, because of how powerful this card can be. So what this card is doing is he has this nice ability where during your turn, while your opponent has a Digimon with no Digivolution sources in it in play, then this Digimon gains plus 1000 DP and Security Attack +1. So that means he's going to be hitting for 13k with an extra security check, and that's just really powerful because it could help close out the game even quicker, and because we're still playing with the sub-theme of trying to get rid of the opponent's Digivolution sources, or catching them in a situation where they'll have a Digimon without any Digivolution sources in play, then that just makes Vikemon still just work relatively well, on top of which he synergizes very nicely with MachGaogamon and the starter deck WereGarurumon, so it doesn't matter which one of those two that we're using underneath Vikemon, as long as one of them's under Vikemon, Vikemon is going to be even stronger than he would be normally, just because the plus 2000 means he could get up to 15, which is, again, really, really powerful, and the extra security check just means he'll be dealing even more damage than he normally would. So he is still just a very fantastic Digimon to be playing around with. And then the last mega of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Regalecusmon. So Regalecusmon is looking to be a really powerful Digimon, especially in this style of deck, just because he's fitting on theme with everything that the deck is doing. So what he's doing specifically is he has a when attacking ability where you get to trash the bottom Digivolution source off of one of the opponent's Digimon, and then when you do, you get to draw 1 card and gain 1 memory. So that's just really powerful just because he's acting as a really good resource engine for the deck, and he's going to be the primary way we're actually going to be trying to get rid of the opponent's evolution sources, just because he is the most reliable and easiest way we can do that. So that's why it's super important that we want to get up into Regalecusmon as quickly as we possibly can to make the rest of our deck kind of function as a whole, because he just allows us to aggress it that much easier, especially paired up with MachGaogamon or WereGarurumon, so that way he could hit for harder security checks, or he could have a higher DP, so that way he could survive the 1 security check he's doing, and he, again, is just being a very powerful resource engine by allowing us to draw cards and gain memory, so that's just making him all super insane for the deck as a whole. Next, on to the options. The only option I'm going to be running in the deck is going to be 4 copies of Hammerspark. So Hammerspark is still just one of the best, if not the best, blue option we could be playing around with, just because for the low cost of 0, we get to gain 1 memory. So this allows us to extend a lot of our plays and make a lot more powerful plays possible. And it has the nice security ability of allowing us to gain 2 memory, so it could act as some good disruption for the opponent if it's checked in the security, just making Hammerspark still just insane of a card to be using. And then the last card of the deck is going to be the only tamer of the deck, and I'm just choosing to use Matt just because this is a budget deck, but obviously Davis is probably the better pick. But again, Matt is still just a decent tamer to be playing around with just because he still has synergy with the deck as a whole. So what he's doing is he is acting as the deck's dedicated memory fixing tamer, so if our memory is ever less than 3, he'll just always hard set it to 3. So this is really important because it allows us to digivolve into Regalecusmon, then swing with Regalecusmon right away, and then hopefully with Regalecusmon's ability triggering, we'll gain some additional benefits to make even more powerful follow-up plays possible. And then on top of which, it's really important because of Vikemon, because Vikemon also has an evo cost of 4, so we could use Matt to put us to 3, Hammerspark go to 4, digivolve into Vikemon, and then swing with Vikemon with all of the benefits. So just having a memory fixing tamer in the deck is super important, and then on top of which, what his ability is doing that's synergizing with the deck is during your turn, when you play a blue Digimon, you could suspend this tamer to trash the bottom of one of your opponent's Digivolution sources off of one of their Digimon. So this is just, again, attacking the opponent's evolution sources passively to try to turn some of our abilities online, and that's still just pretty decent to be thinking about playing around with. And then on top of which, because I am playing 3, it interacts with Lobomon, where we could just use all of the extra mats that we're not really feel like we need to use to just digivolve with for Lobomon to then try to push and swing for game after hopefully Vikemon just took out as much security as he possibly could. So Matt is just, again, another very fantastic card that's synergizing very well with the deck, making the deck run as smoothly as it possibly could. And then there's just a whole bunch of other tech and tools that you could think about utilizing, all depending on what you actually want to utilize, what fits with the deck, and what you could get your hands on depending on what your budget is. So Uppamon is probably going to be the best digitama we could use, just because he is allowing us to draw some cards and helps with the deck's overall consistency. So if you could get your hands on some Uppamons, then he's definitely the preferred main digitama of the deck. And then the 5th digitama doesn't really matter, just because you really care about what Uppamon is doing. Then you also could think about playing the promo Gomamon, just because the Gomamon is going to be rewarding you every time you trash one of the opponent's Digivolution sources once per turn by allowing you to gain some additional memory. So when you swing with Regalecusmon as an example, with this version of Gomamon underneath him, then you'll be gaining 2 memory off of trashing one of the opponent's evolution sources, allowing you to make even more powerful follow-up plays as a result. If you want, you could also think about running a little bit more DP boosting, just because we do have Dolphmon to help DP boost, and DP boosting in blue is still rather rare. So Dolphmon is definitely another card that you could think about utilizing to just make your Digimon as powerful as they possibly could be. Then you also have Ikakumon, which is another card that just synergizes with the opponent not having any Digivolution sources in any of their Digimon by allowing your Digimon to become unblockable, thus making it easier to hit their security and try to close out the game even faster that way. And then you could think about utilizing Zudomon, just because Zudomon has some really powerful synergy with the deck as well. So if you are caught in a situation where you do have to hard play him, you don't feel super bad because he has this nice on-play ability of allowing you to draw 2 cards, helping with the deck's overall consistency, but on top of which he even has another insane inheritable ability where when attacking, if the opponent has a Digimon with no Digivolution sources in it in play, then you get to gain 1 memory. So you could line up a whole bunch of plays where you could swing with Regalecusmon. If their Digimon has only 1 evolution source, then you could get rid of that as part of Regalecusmon's ability, and then on top of that, you could trigger Zudomon's ability to gain an additional memory, and you could even trigger that with Gomamon's ability to gain an additional memory. So you could gain potentially 3 memory off of 1 Regalecusmon swing by them just having a Digimon with a Digivolution source in play. So it's just another really good card to think about utilizing as a result. Or if you want to take a more defensive style approach, you could think about running Shikuamon, just because for each of the opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution sources, then they'll gain Security Attack -1, so that allows you to basically stall them out and sit on this card for a while, and if Regalecusmon keeps swinging, getting rid of their evolution sources, then they'll eventually have Digimon with none, so Shikuamon is definitely a really good card to just be very defensive with. Then, because we're blue, we could also think about playing Omnimon. Because he's Omnimon, his level of removal is good, the fact that he can multi-attack is good, so the card is just good as a whole. Then we have a whole bunch of other spicy tech options that we could think about running. So if we want to run a little bit of removal, we have the Ray of Victory to think about on bouncing the opponent's level 5 back to their hand. And then this has the upside where if we have a blue tamer in play, then we get to unsuspend one of our Digimon. So this is both good offensively and defensively. Offensively, if you're actually able to use this and it's still your turn, then you could get another attack in, thus triggering a whole bunch of on-attack abilities or one-attack abilities again. Or you could use this defensively by just making your Digimon active and leaving it active. Whether you activate it as the main or the security, it's still just a pretty good card to think about overall. And then on top of that, you also have some other removal cards in the form of Full Moon Blaster, which is basically doing almost the exact same thing, except this is interacting more with the opponent having more cards in their hand by putting that level 5 Digimon to the bottom of the deck instead. Or you could just say, screw both of those, I just want to get rid of anybody on the board. You could also think about running Cocytus Breath to fill that same role. Then, in terms of another way to attack the opponent's evolution sources, you could think about running Death Parade Blaster, just because this is a really good way of trashing a whole bunch of the opponent's evolution sources all at once. So this is just another decent tech tool to think about if you're trying to attack the opponent's evolution sources more. And then you also could think about running I'll Drag You Into the Depths as another good removal option, just because of how good this card can be, where if the opponent has a Digimon with no Digivolution sources in play, then all of your Digimon will gain the ability of when they attack it, then they'll be able to delete a Digimon with no Digivolution sources. So this could be a pretty decent card to think about utilizing. I do think it's a little hard to utilize, but it's still a decent card to think about nonetheless. Then, as I mentioned before, Davis is probably the best memory-fixing tamer that we have, because he's also helping with the deck's consistency because of his on-play ability, where we get to look at the top 3 and add a blue and green Digimon among them. So we're not playing any green, so at worst we're always just going to be able to add a blue Digimon, and that's pretty good, and then he's just another fodder card for Lobomon after that. If you want to run even more tamers, then you could think about running the starter deck mat, just because the starter deck mat will passively gain you a memory for the opponent having a Digimon with no Digivolution sources in play. Or if you want to take a more active role in gaining memory, then you could think about running Joe, just because Joe has a nice ability where when you trash one of the opponent's evolution sources off of their Digimon, then you could suspend this tamer to gain a memory. So again, just more memory gaining and synergy with attacking the opponent's evolution sources. So with Joe, you could trigger it off of Regalecusmon's ability, so that way you could swing with Regalecusmon and then gain 2 memory between Joe and his ability natively, on top of any other synergies that you have in the deck. And then there's just a whole bunch of other Digimon you could think about utilizing to gain the ability to attack their Digivolution sources, whether it's from the top or the bottom. So Ikakumon is attacking it from the top, which is a really rare ability, and then Piranhamon is also attacking from the top, where you have Garurumon and Angemon attacking from the bottom, or you could just play the Zudomon to just straight up when Digivolve trash 2 of them. But I'm not super thrilled with Zudomon, especially how this meta is going to be developing, so I definitely think that the other 4 are definitely better options if you're just trying to attack their evolution sources. So there's just a whole bunch of different ways that you could build the deck, all depending on what you could get and what you want to play and prioritize. And I definitely think this is a really fun and powerful deck to play on a budget, with just a whole bunch of different tech options in terms of flexibility on what you can do with the deck, all depending on what you want to play and prioritize. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are different ways that you could support me in the channel. So one of those ways is I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so whenever you use that affiliate link to buy cards off of tcgplayer.com, then some of the money will go to supporting me in the channel. And on top of which, I also do stream over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu. So following and subbing is a good way to support me over on that platform as well. And on top of that, I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook. So whenever you buy one of my designs through them, then some of that money will also help go to supporting me in the channel. And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.